Hello, I'm Terry Christensen, and this is Valley Politics. It's a very ancient saying that the rich get rich and the poor get poorer. We're very conscious of that phenomenon in the Valley right now. So today we'll talk about income inequality in our region with Chris Benner, a leading expert on the subject. Coincidentally, the San Jose City Council recently had a long and heated debate about equity among council districts in city services and spending. Later, we'll hear what some residents have to say about inequality in the Valley. And then Councilmember Magdalena Carrasco will tell us what's going on in Council District 5. That's the Eastside. We'll conclude with the second part of our interview with David Pandori, who was elected to the San Jose City Council in 1990. We'll hear more about his time on the council and also about his two nearly successful runs for mayor. That's what's coming up on Valley Politics. Welcome everyone, and welcome Chris Benner.
Thank you.
So Chris, the Valley economy's been booming for years, tech industry's thriving, unemployment's at a record low, and yet there's virtual panic in the community about income inequality, the growing income inequality, and about displacement, gentrification. So how would you describe the state of income equality or inequality in the Valley?
It's interesting to think about inequality in Silicon Valley and how that's changed over the last 20 years. In 1980, if you look at the largest 150 regions in the country, we were one of the most equal regions in terms of income distribution. Over the last nearly 40 years, we've moved to become one of the most unequal regions in the country. So we have a level of income disparity that's almost unequaled across this country. And the point I want to make about that is because some people say, well, inequality, that's maybe not so bad. You have people who are coming here for opportunity, and if some are doing well, that's fine as long as everyone is improving over time. But we recently looked at the pattern of income distribution in Silicon Valley in the late 2010s, in the last few years, compared to the mid-1990s. And what we found really struck us, because during that time, the average output, economic output per person in the Valley has gone up over 60%. So we were producing a lot more in this Valley, tremendous wealth being created. But 9 out of 10 jobs in the Valley pay less today than they did 20 years ago. So you've got this top in the Valley that's really taking off and generating tremendous assets and wealth.
Those are the tech jobs?
Those are all tech jobs, yeah. But part of the way to think about that is a lot of that income is being accumulated in the form of assets, ownership. It's not necessarily the people working in the high-tech industry. Because one of the other things we looked at is the proportion of output on an industry-by-industry basis that's going to workers. And even in the software sector and hardware manufacturing sector, the proportion going to employees is going down. What we're seeing is that it's going to the owners and investors of the high-tech firms themselves, who many of whom are located here, but many of whom are located all over the country and the globe. And what's going to people living and working in the Valley is shrinking over time.
And that's because the owners and investors are taking the money because we don't have unions for the workers demanding more equal pay. Why is it happening?
Well, there's lots of complex reasons. And one of the things that's challenging about it is that there are some pretty deep structural reasons in the nature of an information global economy that means that we have to really rethink policies and institutions if we're going to deal with it. So one example is if you think about the contrast between local service industries, our restaurants, our retail establishments, compared to these globally connected information industries. Those locally serving industries have a profit margin of maybe 2, 3, 4%, have high costs and are serving a local market. Those other industries are serving a global market, potentially 7 to 8 billion people, and their profit rates are 25, 30% for a variety of reasons. And if you look at the revenue per employee, McDonald's might have $60,000 revenue per employee. Facebook has $1.5 million in revenue per employee.
Per employee.
Apple is over $2 million per employee. Now, here's one of the other aspects of that I don't think is widely understood. Economists talk about it as zero marginal costs, which I know is a complex technical term. But the way to think about it is, if you're building an automobile, you have lots of costs in building the material itself that are ongoing. Each time you build a new automobile, you've got the material and the parts and the labor that go into it. But in many information economy products, whether it's software or Facebook, there's lots of upfront costs in developing the product, but once it's produced, whether you're rolling it out to 1 person or 2 billion plus people in the case of Facebook, the additional costs are next to nothing. And so the revenue they're able to generate has very little to do with the labor input and has more to do with what the market will bear. And so we talk about in the economics field as the increasing capturing of economic rents. These are the revenues that companies are getting, not because they're producing goods that consumers want to buy, which of course is good that they're selling that, but there's an increment on top of that they're getting because it's a non-competitive market. It's essentially a monopoly market. So that's the part of the wealth that's being accumulated that's not only unfair, it's actually undermining our economic fortunes and economic growth over time.
Well, let's talk about that, because that latter point about undermining our economic fortunes is what applies to all the rest of us at any stage, at either end or in the middle of the income curve. So why should regions, why should all of us be concerned about this? Some of us are okay. Lots of us are not. But for those of us who are okay, why should we be worried about this?
Well, there's several different reasons. One is, there's a growing amount of evidence all over the globe, actually, that those places, whether it's countries or cities or regions, that are more unequal actually are more vulnerable to economic downturns and grow much more slowly. And I think the easiest way to think about that is if you're in a rapidly changing economy, in which you have to adjust to changing technology, changing competitors, changing market conditions, no company, no individual is an island. In fact, what you need to compete is the collaboration and connection between your universities, between the curriculum in your high schools, between the aspirations that youth have or adults have of the kind of jobs that they want to get, the connections between companies and their suppliers, the IP lawyers, all those kind of things. And if you're in an environment where there's growing social disparities, there's a lot of conflict and a lot of inability to respond quickly to those changing competitive demands. So we fall behind other parts of the globe if we have deep inequality. And I think we're seeing that in Silicon Valley now with the high-tech companies. There's a very strong techlash. People upset about the inequality, but also the concerns about privacy and the impact on our democracy and the sort of insulation of many high-tech companies from regulation and social control. And I think that spills over into undermining the ability to innovate new ideas and new projects that are serving human needs. I'll give you one other example of that, which I think is really important, which has to do with public investment in science and technology. If you look at most of the high-tech companies and industries in this area, they have some roots back in public sector investment. Google algorithm was first developed as part of a National Science Foundation grant. If you look at most of the technologies in the Apple iPhone, whether it's even the Siri voice recognition system, much less the GPS or cell phone system or the semiconductors, all have their roots in some way into major public sector investment. Some of it's Department of Energy, some of it's the military, and that's all great, and we should be doing more of that. But what's happened over the last 30 to 40 years is that our public investment in science and technology development has declined. And part of the reason for that, I think, is that people don't see the return on investment. If you're a venture capitalist, for instance, and you're investing in a new enterprise, you expect to get an equity stake in that. You're taking heavy risks, you expect to get heavy return. Well, the public sector can be conceptualized as essentially a very early stage venture capitalist. We invested early in the internet, we invested very early in satellites, all these things that are now really driving our information economy. But we as a society and people didn't take an equity stake in that. And so companies are able to come along and amalgamate this collectively produced and collectively inherited technology, produce some incremental improvements on them that are real improvements, and they should be rewarded from that. But then they are able to create these technological monopolies and able to charge whatever the market will bear and capture that back in a way that the public sector doesn't see the returns on that innovation investment. So we're underinvesting in innovation at a time when we should be investing deeply in renewable energy sources, in alternatives for plastics, in new transportation systems, in affordable housing technologies. You can imagine a whole range of fundamental new scientific and technological developments we should be investing in. But the public will to support that isn't there, in part because of this inequality between the returns that companies are getting and their investors and what the rest of us are getting.
And the investment should be by the higher levels of government, right? Can local government play a role in this?
Well, most of our investments in science and technology development have certainly come from the federal government, to some extent from state government in terms of its investment in higher education in California. Local governments have not been a big source of investment in scientific development, but there certainly are ways of investing in new technologies and new developments at a local level that can make a difference in people's lives and support the commercialization of some of those new innovations.
What's an example of something a local government could do?
Well, one of the key things that local governments have control over is land use.
Yeah.
And one of our biggest challenges in this region is, of course, increasing land prices and housing prices associated with that, and the tremendously long distances that people have to drive to make those connections. So what are ways that local governments can explore the new models of affordable housing development? Small housing, how do we make sure we upzone so we can grow higher and more densely? And how do we do that in places that are close to job opportunities? And how do we invest in new technologies that can reduce our dependence on individual automobiles and free up our roads for more efficient movement of goods and information? So some of that may be investment in mass transit and VTA. But here's another example where the concern about people's livelihoods undermines our ability to invest going forward, because I believe that there's a tremendous opportunity in autonomous vehicles to link up to mainline transportation systems, to provide transportation for our aging population, to really improve the efficiency of our local government systems. But there's also such a concern, I think a very real concern, about, well, what about the livelihoods of all the taxi drivers and delivery drivers and bus drivers that are dependent on those livelihoods? Well, if we were in a system where we were preserving or protecting people, not protecting jobs, then we might have a different attitude towards these innovations that could improve our local quality of life and reduce people's expenditures on an automobile, for instance. Then we could be moving ahead and innovating much more rapidly.
Surely part of the problem with local governments responding to some of these challenges is local governments, plural. So 101 cities in the Bay Area. I'm not counting Santa Cruz and Santa Cruz County.
You could add a few more there.
Nine counties in the traditionally defined Bay Area. Right. 15 cities just in Santa Clara County. I think 38 school districts. So how can local government pull together to respond to some of these if the state and federal government are not going to do that?
Yeah, so such a good question. And I'll point to some of the research that we've done with my collaborators that shows that those regions that are able to collaborate more effectively as a region and have more unified government are able to grow more reliably and resist downturns much more effectively. So there's research to say we should be doing that. So how do we do that? Well, part of it is investing more in our regional planning bodies, ABEG and MTC, and giving them, real power and authority.
Yeah.
So it's not just about setting targets of affordable housing or transportation systems, but how do you enforce that? And so that so many of our jurisdictions in the region that have been underbuilding their housing actually can be compelled to do that effectively.
And there are a few regions in the country that have some form of metropolitan regional government with some authority. Not here, but in some other places.
Yeah, I mean, Jacksonville, Florida, for instance, is a unified city and county government. It's a very strong sort of government. Nashville, Tennessee is another example. But even in places like Kansas City, where it's a 2-state metropolitan region with 7 counties and 150, 60, something like that, different local authorities, they've come together in their Mid-America Regional Council, which is the equivalent of our MTC, and they're collaborating on everything from early childhood education to services for the elderly, to environmental services, to economic development, even international trade collaboration at one point they're collaborating on.
Chris, we have less than 30 seconds left, so wrap it up. Are we going to save ourselves, or are we just going to dig ourselves deeper and deeper into this pit of inequality?
Well, I think if you look at the history of this country, there's reason for optimism. That when people realize the problem, we come together and we find solutions. We're a tremendously innovative country, and I think we're beginning to see the signs of it. So I'm an optimist. It's going to be hard, but I think we can solve these problems.
Okay, on that note, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now let's hear what some locals had to say about the state of equality in the Valley. Then, San Jose Councilmember Magdalena Carrasco will brief us on what's going on in Council District 5. That's the East Side.
We're kind of falling behind if we're not in the tech industry or have some sort of good paying job here.
What I think about people in this valley, I believe we're becoming less equal. I'm a native of San Jose, California, and I've been priced out.
Less equal economically because the job market is requiring more education, and the jobs that the mainly working people had, they're going away because of mechanization.
I'm Magdalena Carrasco, Council Member for District 5, East San Jose. I wanted to give you an update about all the great events happening in the district. The programs are intended to keep our children safe, are educational, and lots of fun. San Jose provides safe and fun spaces for your children to learn and grow, and during the summer, our children experience what is known as the summer slide. Numerous studies show that kids who don't read during summer vacation actually slip in reading ability by the time autumn rolls around. Enroll your student into one of our library reading programs to keep their minds engaged over the break. The ability to swim is a life-saving skill. If your child needs swim lessons, please contact the Mayfair Community Center at 408-794-1060. I have scholarships for both swim lessons and summer camps to keep your kiddos active all summer long. If your teenager needs somewhere to go in these hot summer nights, I was able for the 3rd year to provide open gym at the Alum Rock Youth Center with free food, games, and sports. And Viva Parks is already underway Monday through Thursday, every week, rotating through our East San Jose parks, including Children of the Rainbow Park, Plata Arroyo, Capitol Park, Hillview, Mayfair, and Emma Prush. To view the full schedule, go to my website under events at www.sanjoseca.gov/district5. And finally, I wanted to invite everyone to my National Night Out on August 6th at Emma Prush Park at 6 p.m. We have zip lining, free healthy food, entertainment, local artists, community booths, and it's a fun time to get to know your community. You may be the lucky one to win a bike, a skateboard, or even tickets to a fun event at the largest national night out in the region. As you can see, East San Jose will be activated all summer long with great activities. And for more information, contact my team at 408-535-4905. See you this summer.
Now we'll conclude our interview with David Pandori, who served on the San Jose City Council from 1991 to 1998, and twice ran for mayor. Let's take a look. closing San Carlos Street through San Jose State. You shepherded that, right?
That was collaboration too, because there was, back in that day, there was a very adverse relationship between the Campus Community Association and the university. The last thing anybody wanted to see was San Carlos Street closed because of the impact that was going to have. But we put together a large task force. Some might have said too big, but I think in the end it worked out well, because by the end of that long process, I don't know if it was a matter of just boring people to death, people came together, and I think it was for the good of everyone. There's a wonderful walk now.
Yeah.
People can take from the campus community down the closed walkway on San Carlos. The campus has been unified, 7th Street's been improved, and so I think that's a better example of me collaborating than maybe the other ones that you brought up.
Well, it was a transformative project, and as you say, the Negley Park campus community folks were very skeptical and mistrustful at the university, so it took that time to get people to a different level of trust. Yeah. Project Crackdown?
Yeah, well, that was in a day with a well-staffed police department that was able to do proactive things and really inspire neighborhood people to reach out and work with them and have the courage to report problems in parks and gang activity and drugs. And so it was a great opportunity to have that implemented in a couple different neighborhoods in the district and to see it have a benefit. And it was actually through that I really grew to become interested in working in the district attorney's office after leaving council.
What about disappointments in those 8 years? Is there something you really had hoped to do you weren't able to do?
Well, you know, I think I was really pretty happy with a lot of the things that we were able to do. That was a go get it kind of era where there was lots of building going on, the arena opened. We moved the tech into the center of the downtown. That museum opened. The Children's Discovery Museum opened. We got the Biblioteca in the Washington community funded and under construction. Roosevelt Park was improved. Burnell Park was doubled in size. So there were a lot of good things to look at. The thing I guess I'm disappointed at was I thought we were making headway and progress on Guadalupe River Park. But for a couple of notable exceptions, one was getting the headquarters purchased, and Ken Yeager and Cindy Chavez were instrumental in that. And then Shirley Lewis working with the Rotary on that beautiful play garden. Other than that, it's just been hugely disappointing to see what's been going on over there. It's kind of turned into a dumping ground, and the city has seemed more interested in using it as a parking lot for the earthquakes than in a campground.
Yes.
Than doing anything positive at all.
I was up there recently, and I was shocked actually
Yeah,
at the state of it.
it's in horrible condition.
Yeah. Well, in 2006, you ran for mayor. You published another booklet, more policy focused rather than how to.
Right.
And I've retained a copy of that too. We'll show it to our viewers. You ran for mayor in 2006, and you came in third. So you didn't make the runoff. Chuck Reed becomes mayor. What do you think happened? Why didn't you win? Mercury endorsed you. Very nice endorsement.
I think if I had run any kind of thoughtful, reasonable effort, or put the effort I really needed to put into it, I would have.
Yeah.
I was the last one to get into that race, a field of 5 or 6.
Yeah.
And I didn't start until February. I wanted to start sooner, but I got stuck in a trial that was supposed to finish a lot sooner. But in reality, I should have started 6 months before. The fact of the matter is I had a campaign that ran basically for 3 months. 3 months. I was outspent 4 or 5 times the amount of money, and I went from 0 to third in that amount of time. And I think a lot of it was due to that book. The internet was just starting to make an impact on campaigns then, and I thought that was going to be the great equalizer. I was outspent 4 times, and we did this book, and it was a book that had links in it. So if you downloaded it, you could click on things and learn even more.
Yeah, this is 2006, so that was pretty innovative.
Yeah, and it was strange because, I mean, for a politician, you call it a piece of literature. For a voter, you call it junk mail, right? The good is, in the last week and a half of that campaign, there were 10,000 downloads of that.
Wow.
And the campaign was really taking hold. There had been a tracking poll only like 4 weeks earlier where I was in like 5th or 6th place. And I moved up to 3rd. I think I finished just out of behind Cindy Chavez by about 4 or 5 points. I beat Dave Cortese, who'd been campaigning a year and spent $1 million. I still look on that experience as a very positive experience of what a campaign can be.
Have you thought about managing campaigns?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah?
And then I stopped.
Yeah, I think you got a better job right now. So one of the things you talk about in that book, and it's something you've been, hesitate to use the word obsessed, but concerned about all through your career, as you were with Mayor McHenry, while you were on the council, later on when you were co-chaired in Vision 2040, the new general plan, was Coyote Valley. Right. And your criticism of the consistently flawed planning of Coyote Valley. How do you feel about where the city is now on Coyote Valley?
I think it's great. I couldn't be more pleased. That was kind of a factor why I got into the race late, because nobody was talking about it, and those mayoral elections are the great opportunity for sellouts. I'm not trying to personalize anything, but the development interests in the city see that those are the elections where they have the opportunity to influence candidates who are running for mayor, and that's the single most important seat in city government that's going to have a say on big things like Coyote Valley. And it was clear that Coyote Valley was in play in that election, and nobody was standing up for it. And so that was a big reason why I got in.
So right now, it looks like the city is going to purchase development rights to a big chunk of the valley with bond money that the voters passed, and development is going to be on hold indefinitely on a chunk of the land.
Yeah, it's amazing. And more than that, when it was first efforts that were made to open it, and that was really under Mayor McHenry, the whole idea was it was going to be this campus industrial, so we could get the maturing Silicon Valley companies, the big ones that were outgrowing the smaller sites in Palo Alto and North San Jose, and we capture these huge campuses in the north part. And if you had asked me back then, that was in the 80s, where would be the next high-tech campus, I would have told you it would have been in Coyote. Mm-hmm. And I just think it's absolutely wonderful. The next big campus isn't this suburban, cold, parking lot place, but it's going to be a village and not a campus, and it's going to be Google. And instead on the periphery of the city, it's going to be in the center of the city. And it's going to be part of really, I think, reimagining what a downtown can be.
David, we got less than a minute left. How do you think city government is functioning now generally? Do you have any advice for our current council and mayor?
I think it's functioning pretty well. I think the benefit of district elections is still there, although I'm kind of disappointed that they seem to be many stages for big interests to play themselves out, business and labor, and I'm not sure the neighborhood voice is heard as much in that play out of the Titans. But overall, I think it's a very open government with people who want to do well, and it's a very collaborative place.
That's it for us, David. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Next month, we'll talk about the burst of development activity in downtown San Jose and ask if this is finally downtown's time to shine. Meanwhile, you can catch up on previous shows on our website at creatvsj.org or on YouTube by searching for CreaTV San Jose. And you can let us know what you think about our show and suggest future topics or guests by email at valleypolitics@creatvsj.org or on Twitter at @valley_politics and by following us on Facebook. And now that's all, folks. Thanks for watching Valley Politics. See you next time.